speaker for this session is Mr. Hamza Hameed. Mr. Hamza Hameed is a Pakistani lawyer currently working as a legal consultant at the International Institute for the Unification of Private Laws in Detroit, Rome. His primary focus is on sector transaction laws, whereby he works on Cape Town Convention and its protocols. He is closely involved in the activities of Cape Town Convention Academic Project and is the manager of the fundraising and administration at Untitled Foundation. He holds an LLB from the University of London International Program and an advanced LLM degree in Air and Space Law from the International Institute for Air and Space Law at Leiden University. He is also the co-leader of the legal team and the national point of contact for Pakistan at the Space Generation Advisory Council. I humbly request Mr. Hamza Hameed to talk to us today.
It's a shame that Shivani had to disconnect because I was very grateful to her for this kind invitation, and I'm very grateful to the CMR University School of Legal Studies in Bengaluru for inviting the UniDRAW Secretariat to deliver a presentation on one of our most important instruments here at this conference. It's terrible that all of this has to take place online. I would have loved to be in Bengaluru right now, but I must say it's a pleasure to see many colleagues and friends and future colleagues and friends at this conference today. As Shivani pointed out, I'll be talking about the aircraft protocol of the Cape Town Convention and how it's a tool to promote growth in the aviation sector by means of providing an international system of secure transactions law. I will look at the more structural elements of the Cape Town Convention and some of the more institutional aspects of the aircraft protocol. And I understand that my colleague Patrick will be looking at some of the more implementation related issues. So I'll structure my presentation by talking a bit more generally about the Cape Town Convention and its aircraft protocol in the beginning, and then digging into some of the specificities of the aircraft protocol, and then concluding with what the Secretariat is continuing to do in pushing the aircraft protocol and the Cape Town Convention more generally to partners across the world. As most of you probably already know, the Cape Town Convention is a two-tier treaty system designed to facilitate asset-based financing and leasing for specific types of high-value, mobile, and uniquely identifiable pieces of equipment. This two-tier system works such that there is a head convention, which is the Convention on International Interest in Mobile Equipment, which all of you know as the Cape Town Convention. And then there are protocols for specific sectors. These protocols cater to the specific needs of these sectors when it comes to secure transactions law. And presently, we have a protocol for the aircraft industry, which I'll talk about today, a protocol for the rail industry, which was completed in 2007, a protocol for space assets completed in 2012, and a protocol for mining, agriculture, and construction equipment, which we finalized last year in Pretoria. The Cape Town Convention is regarded as one of the most successful commercial treaties ever negotiated. At present, the Cape Town Convention has 92 signatory states, 82 of which can be regarded as contracting states of the convention. Furthermore, the European Union has also approved of the convention, its aircraft protocol, and its rail protocol. And altogether, these 82 states comprise over 72% of global nominal GDP. The aircraft protocol, which was negotiated alongside the convention, is the first and most widely adopted of the existing protocols, with having 79 contracting states and ongoing negotiations with several other countries to get them to show up as contracting states as well. The economic benefits of the Cape Town Convention and its protocols are widespread. On this slide, you can see some of the economic benefits, and I'll talk about them shortly. But these are only from studies which have been conducted internationally and studies that we have commissioned. The aircraft protocol, for example, is a great example of how a financing instrument can allow the growth and expansion of an entire industry. The coming into force of the aircraft protocol has reduced the cost of financing aircraft equipment by at least 30%, Moreover, one study showed that the adoption of the aircraft protocol by an average country could save it between 7.6 billion and 11.1 billion USD over a 20-year period. And moreover, for the rail protocol, for example, as you can see from the slide, from the picture on the right, a recent economic assessment conducted only within 20 European countries showed that it could have over 19.4 billion in total benefits just in Europe. Lastly, an economic assessment recently conducted for the Mining, Agriculture and Construction Protocol of the Cape Town Convention showed that over a 10-year period, the MAC protocol can increase the stock of mining, agriculture and construction equipment in developing countries by 90 billion US dollars. The Mining, Agriculture and Construction Protocol is predicted to have a positive impact of 23 billion on GDP in developing countries and of over 7 billion in developed countries, for a total impact on GDP equivalent to 30 billion a year. The success of the aircraft protocol has been reflected by the success of the International Registry, which was established to record security rights and interests within aircraft objects. On 22 January 2019, Aviaretto, which manages the International Registry for Aircraft Equipment, celebrated its 1 millionth registration and now has over $500 billion of aircraft assets registered within it. This registry remains electronically available for over 99.7% of the time in any given year and has recently adopted the 8th edition of its regulations. I think it's important to now reflect on what has resulted in all of these benefits and what the aircraft protocol of the Cape Town Convention is. And in order to do that, I thought it would be best to look back very shortly at the history of the problem that was faced by the aircraft sector and how the Cape Town Convention and its aircraft protocol addressed it. In 1990, there were several problems related to the financing of airplanes. Airplanes were high-value objects. They regularly moved internationally and cross borders, and there was a large increase in privately operated commercial airlines. The existing framework for aircraft financing was, and in some parts of the world still is, the Geneva Convention on the International Recognition of Rights in Aircraft, developed in 1948. This was an attempt to harmonize conflict rules on property interests in or leases of aircraft. It provides that the applicable substantive law is the law of the state of nationality of the aircraft. This treaty was created in 1948 and entered into force in 1953, and at the time of writing of this presentation had 90 parties. However, the Geneva Convention in the 1980s had several aspects which were slightly outdated. For example, the scope of the Geneva Convention was unclear and limited with respect to leases in certain cases. The absence of knowledge by a secured creditor of the existence of a previous unregistered interest was a condition to the secured creditor obtaining priority by registration. So a requirement that has been eliminated in many modern secured transactions regimes was still part of the Geneva Convention. 3, the provisions of the Geneva Convention on remedies do not take extrajudicial enforcement into account. Moreover, at this stage, it would have been possible to update and refine the Geneva Convention in order to clarify and expand its scope to deal with this problematic aspect. However, this would have largely remained an unsatisfactory solution, as the Geneva Convention in its entirety is essentially a treaty based on a conflict rule approach, whereby it refers mostly to issues of the law. In most issues, it refers to the law of the nationality of the aircraft, rather than to a global regime which would be applicable all across the world. As such, a financier would still have been left with the burden of researching in detail the substantive law in effect in the state of the nationality of the aircraft, rather than being able to depend upon a uniform instrument. Moreover, depending on the content of the applicable substantive law, the financier might not have obtained the desired protection. Therefore, a conflict rule approach would not achieve uniformity, as the outcome might be different depending on the national regime designated by the conflict rule. As such, in the 1980s and 90s, there was a lot of private sector support for a uniform instrument for facilitating secure transactions law in the aviation industry. This private sector was brought together by the Aviation Working Group, which comprises of most manufacturers, lessors, airlines, and operators in the aviation sector. The Aviation Working Group, alongside the secretariats of both the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, and the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law, UNIDROIT, came together and negotiated with member states a treaty designed to facilitate aircraft financing and develop an international system of secure transactions law that would be applicable to the aviation sector. So, what are the main objectives of the Cape Town Convention, and how does it achieve them? The main objectives of the Cape Town Convention are sixfold. One, to facilitate the acquisition and financing of economically important items and mobile equipment by providing for the creation of an international interest which will be recognized in all contracting states. Two, to provide the creditor with a range of basic default and insolvency-related remedies, and where there is evidence of default, a means of obtaining speedy relief pending final determination of the claim on its merits. Three, to establish an electronic international registry for the registration of international interests, which will give notice of their existence to third parties and enable the creditor to preserve its priority against subsequently registered interests and against unregistered interests and creditors in the debtor's insolvency. Four, to ensure that through the relevant protocol, the particular needs of the industry sector concerned are met. Five, to grant contracting states a degree of flexibility in adhering to the international regime by allowing, to a well-defined and limited extent, policy choices through declarations while preserving the basic uniformity of the legal regime. And six, by these means, to give intending creditors greater confidence in the decision to grant credit, enhancing the credit rating of equipment receivables, reducing borrowing costs and credit insurance payments, and to the advantage of all interested parties. So, the structure of the Aircraft Protocol of the Cape Town Convention is divided into 6 chapters. The first chapter looks at the sphere of application of the Aircraft Protocol and general provisions. The second chapter looks at default remedies, priorities, and assignments. The third chapter looks at the provisions of the International Registry. The fourth chapter covers issues related to jurisdiction. The fifth chapter covers issues with its relationship to other conventions. The sixth chapter looks at final provisions, such as entry into force. And overall, the Aircraft Protocol has 37 articles. While we don't have time to go into all of these individually, and I'd love to do that given the opportunity, we'll look at some of the most important elements of the Aircraft Protocol and elements which have made it a big success. So firstly, let's look at the question of scope. The scope of the Aircraft Protocol is defined in Article 1.2 of the protocol. It covers aircraft as defined in the Chicago Convention. It covers aircraft engines, and it covers aircraft objects. Details of these can be found within this article, but it's important to note that the Aircraft Protocol, as consistent with the Geneva Convention, does not extend to military aircraft or aircraft operated by armed forces. As such, it's only used in private sector financing of commercial airplanes. So what does the Aircraft Protocol do? Whenever a loan is being granted, a financier largely looks at 3 specific risk factors in deciding how much that loan will cost or whether or not to extend credit at all. These include the amount of the loan, the degree of certainty over loan repayments, and the expected value of collateral, which can be recovered net any costs of recovery. The Aircraft Protocol impacts on the collateral value factor by seeking to increase the expected value of the recovered asset, firstly by making recovery more certain and quicker, And secondly, by allowing the creditor to realize the asset value and redeploying it whenever there is demand. So all of this is done by means of an insolvency mechanism, which is built into the Cape Town Convention and then defined in more detail in the aircraft protocol as it applies to the aviation sector. The meaning of default under the Cape Town Convention is put forward by Article 11, where it says that the debtor and creditor may at any time agree in writing as to what constitutes default, or otherwise give rise to the rights and remedies specified by the relevant articles. In the case where the debtor and creditor have not agreed to what default is, a default is a situation which substantially deprives the creditor of what it is entitled to expect under the agreement. So how does it work? As I said earlier, the aircraft protocol establishes an international registry to record international interests in aircraft objects. These international interests could be title reservation agreements, security agreements, leasing agreements, or notices of sale. Once a registration has been made in the international registry, this registration has priority over all subsequently registered international interests in that aircraft object, as well as all unregistered international interests or national interests in that same aircraft object. There are certain safeguards built into this system for items such as non-consensual liens, whether those be rights of maintenance or parking fees. But generally, if and when a creditor registers its international interest in the international registry, this interest will be protected in the case of the insolvency of the debtor. The insolvency mechanism is put forward by Article 11 of the Aircraft Protocol, Article 11, and this article is the single most economically important provision of the convention. This provision is what determines what happens in the case of an insolvency. And for the Aircraft Protocol, a contracting state has to make a declaration to either one of two alternatives, which then determine what happens in the case of an insolvency. Alternative A is described as the creditor-friendly alternative, whereas alternative B is described as a softer and more debtor-friendly alternative. In the case that a contracting state does not make any declaration, the national insolvency laws will apply. Quickly, insolvency alternative A is such that a contracting state must specify a waiting period by which, prior to its expiration, the debtor must either A, give possession of the object to the creditor, or B, cure all defaults and agree to perform all future obligations under the applicable agreement. 2, if the debtor fails to take action by the expiration of the waiting period, the creditor may exercise all remedies available to it under the applicable law and the parties' agreement. Alternative A does not allow local insolvency law to prevent or delay the creditor exercising remedies at the end of the waiting period. And during the waiting period, the debtor must preserve the object and maintain its value in accordance with the parties' agreement. Alternative B, which is a more debtor-friendly arrangement, suggests that on insolvency, the creditor must request the debtor to notify the creditor in a specified time period whether the debtor will A, cure all defaults and perform all future obligations under the agreement and related transaction documents, or B, give the creditor the opportunity to take possession of the object. Quite importantly, of the 79 contracting states of the Aircraft Protocol, 78 have, almost all states have declared alternative A as the insolvency regime, with only one state having chosen alternative B. Due to the shortage of time, I'm not going to dig into this slide in detail, but these are some of the example transactional structures that the Aircraft Protocol of the Cape Town Convention promotes. The one on the left is a typical aircraft financing arrangement with a supplier, lessor, lessee, and lender, whereas the one on the right is a typical sale and leaseback agreement. Both these types of transactions are greatly facilitated by the Aircraft Protocol because rights created at all stages can be registered in the international registry. The aircraft protocol has many benefits for aircraft financiers, lessors, airlines, and aircraft operators. For creditors, it brings speed, certainty, and cost savings to repossession, deregistration, and export of aircraft objects in case of the debtor insolvency. It protects creditors' interest in aircraft objects by creating an international registry, which is available 24/7 electronically. And it subjects interest in the international registry to a simple priority regime, which is applicable all across the world. For debtors, the Cape Town Convention and its aircraft protocol reduce the cost of borrowing and getting access to finance, broaden the options available for acquiring finance, create opportunities to upgrade to modern fleets, make it easier for them to compete with other players on the international market, and allow for greater security when purchasing aircraft objects. Lastly, if a state makes the right declarations under the aircraft protocol of the Cape Town Convention, the 2011 Aircraft Sector Understanding of Export Credit for Civil Aircraft allows contracting states of the Cape Town Convention with the right declarations to obtain a really large discount in the financing of airplanes within their country. Right now, 28 states are eligible for this discount, and a full list of states can be found on this link right here. So to conclude, at present, the Cape Town Convention and its aircraft protocol are regarded as one of the most successful commercial law treaties ever negotiated. The UNIDROIT Secretariat, the Aviation Working Group, and other partners continue to promote these instruments to allow more countries to take advantage of the economic benefits which these treaties provide. We are also continuing the promotion of other protocols of the Cape Town Convention to extend the benefits of this system to other important industries. Noting the nature of this conference and the people here, I thought I'd also talk briefly about the Cape Town Convention Academic Project, which is a project that facilitates the study of the Cape Town Convention. This is a partnership between UNIDROIT and the University of Cambridge, with the Aviation Working Group as its primary sponsor. On the website of the Cape Town Convention Academic Project, you have a comprehensive digitized and searchable repository with over 1,300 documents relating to the Cape Town Convention, which range from documents of its development, cases, academic articles, and ongoing issues within the protocol and the convention. Moreover, students can also access the official commentary to the Cape Town Convention free of cost through this website. The Cape Town Convention Academic Project also manages the publication of the Cape Town Convention Academic Journal and conducts related projects on the side. Lastly, we conduct a large international conference every year, the last of which was held about 2 weeks ago, at which I had the pleasure to see many faces that I see on this call as well right now. If there are any questions, I'd be very happy to take them, and I'd like to thank all the organizers of this workshop again for inviting the UNIDROIT Secretariat to present here. Thank you.